The Waheela is said to hail from the watershed of the South Nahani River in Canada's Northwest Territories, a rugged national park and a mecca for extreme outdoor adventurers. The Nahani Valley, as it is sometimes called, is a place of myth and mystery, home to legends of lost gold mines, mysterious decapitations, forgotten tribes, and prehistoric monsters. You can learn more about this by looking up for the book Legends of the Nahani Valley, a nonfiction book. The word Wahila is not a local Indian word, nor does it have sub-Arctic origins. In fact, it was first introduced to the world by Ivan T. Sanderson, an eccentric zoologist and adventurer and a pioneer in the field of Fortean, the study of unexplained phenomena. In fact, Sanderson is considered by some to be one of the founding fathers of cryptozoology. In October 1974, a year after Sanderson's death, one of Sanderson's unpublished articles entitled The Dire Wolf appeared in the magazine Pursuit. This article described a giant white wolf which lived in the Nahani Valley. Sanderson called this creature the Wahila, after a mysterious wolf-like monster said to haunt the forest of the northern Michigan. We'll talk a little bit more about the states in this, but I'm going to go on with a little bit extra stuff here as well. Sanderson's article, coupled with some of his private correspondence, described how he and his, by extensions, much of the Western world first came to learn of this mysterious white wolf of the North Country. It was about maybe 1960s. Sanderson was approached by a young mechanic from Philadelphia named Frank Graves. Graves had read Sanderson's book, Abominable Snowman Legend Come to Life, one of the first works to explore the Sasquatch Yeti phenomenon, and decided to make a trip to the Nahani Valley in order to investigate a hunch that Sasquatch-like creature lived in the region. He approached Sanderson in order to ask the seasoned adventurer for advice which might aid him in his own expedition. So Sanderson hooked Graves up with 4 men who had also approached him for advice, and who also hoped to explore the Nahani Valley. These men were members of the so-called American Expeditionary Society, known as the acronym AES, an academic club comprised of about 30 American university students who hoped to resurrect the dying art of old-fashioned exploratory expeditions. That summer, Frank Graves and his 4 AES companions flew to Fort Simpson, Northwest Territories, purchased a flat-bottom scow with a motor, and made their way down the Laird River and up the South Nahani. The 5 companions established a base camp deep in the Nahani Valley at the base of an enormous waterfall called Virginia Falls. From there, Graves made several expeditions above the falls on foot. At all times, he was accompanied by an Indian guide. During one such excursion, Graves' Indian companion brought along a dog. He hoped that his canine companion might be able to flush out any game they came across. The trio worked their way up a glen which led from the river. Eventually, they came to a small plateau covered with grass and brush. Sure enough, Graves' native companion spotted some wild fowl in the timber below. With his dog by his side, he ambled down the slope towards them, hoping to bag something for dinner. Graves opted to stay up on the plateau in case any game appeared in his partner's absence. He was armed with a double-barreled 12-gauge shotgun and would be able to take any game that came his way. Suddenly there was a rustle in the bushes not far from where Graves was standing. Thinking that the hunter's dog might be approaching, he did not raise his gun. He regretted this laxity when an enormous snow-white animal ambled out of the brush. At first, Graves took his vision of what he saw of this animal to be a polar bear. When he looked a little closer, however, he saw that it looked more like a gigantic dog. It stood up on long legs, more like a dog or a wolf. It had a wide, flat head and rather short ears. Graves panicked and fired both barrels of his shotgun at the creature. The animal hardly seemed to notice. It slowly turned away and wandered back into the forest. With shaking fingers, Graves slipped another shell into his weapon and fired at the creature's rear. Amazingly, the animal maintained its leisurely pace as if nothing had happened. Graves' Indian companion quickly returned, thinking that Graves had killed some game. When the white man related his terrifying experience to his red companion, the native insisted that they return to their boat and leave the area at once. Only when they reached the safety of their base camp downriver did the native explain that the animal Graves encountered was not an extremely large wolf, but rather another animal entirely. These were solitary creatures, not pack animals like gray wolves. They were much larger than wolves, had splayed feet, had thick, heavy tail. These beasts, the Indian said, were quite rare. Most of them lived further to the north. Some of them made annual trips into the Mackenzie Mountains, of which the Nahani Valley is part of, and a few stayed in the Nahani Valley all year round. Interestingly, Frank Graves and his Indian companion were not the only men to speak of a giant white wolf-like creature of the Northland. In a letter to Ivan Sanderson, a man whose signature this author was unable to decipher, claimed that in October 1970, while visiting the town of Moosonee in northern Ontario, he heard tell of this creature from the lips of Dene Indian who claimed to hail from Nahani country. The Dene were terrified of these monsters, the man's Indian informant claimed. They were impossible to kill. The animal looked a little like a husky Alsatian crossbreed, but was many times larger. Its rear was more akin to that of a St. Bernard. It had an 11-foot long body and a 4-foot long tail. The rear portion of the body apparently slopes away from the manner of a bear. The writer wrote, the head appears to be low slung and flattened and having a broad muzzle. Colors range from brown to white, is basically what this person had wrote. Also, its habits are disgusting if it exists. Continued the writer, and to continue on, part carrion eater, it can take a bear apart, but prefers to live on injured or young animals. Its delight is to snatch the young from the mother while she is in the process of giving birth. Also said to attack men on sight. Almost invincible, he has but one enemy. Now hang on to your hat. That enemy is, and kind of left it as that. Other descriptions of the great white wolf of the northern country are eerie consistent with another letter that was written by the Indian informant that he explained of. For example, the dire wolf. Ivan Sanderson mentioned that an old friend of his, professional cameraman turned film director, known as Tex Ziegler, made a few points about what he called the great white wolf of Alaska back in the 1950s, long before Frank Graves encountered. what he saw. Before he became involved in the film industry, Ziegler worked as a prospector. Sorry, I was going to say professor. A prospector, then as a trader, and finally as a pilot to the Alaskan wilderness, earning himself the epithet of the flying trader. During his days in the northern country, he came across gigantic solitary white wolves on a number of occasions. Similar to the letter to the editor published in Volume 2, Number 1 of the online Fortin magazine, North American by Fortin Review 2000, a man who identified himself as Paul W. and who worked in the outdoor industry described an enormous white wolf which was good friend encountered in the wilderness of northern Ontario, not far from his hunting lodge. He estimated that this animal, which was feasting on a moose carcass at the time, weighed at least 200 pounds. It had a large, broad head, and its front legs were longer than its rear legs. It did not look much like a wolf and was larger and more robust than even a big alpha male wolf should be. Its tracks were a whopping 8 inches wide. Okay. Now, there are theories. Some of those who have commented that the Waheela over the years have speculated that it is simply an unusual large wolf, perhaps a genetic freak shunned by its pack for its gigantism. Okay, so being so big. Others suggest that the lone white wolf of the northern lands might actually be some sort of white bear, perhaps a spirit or a Kermode bear or a starving albino black bear. Okay, this is just what some of the things that they're saying that they thought of. Even go as far as saying that it's a cross between a wolf and a hyena. Okay, now we're going to take some things back a little bit and bring it into parts of the U.S. Okay, on May 16th, 2018, a Montanan rancher shot and killed a strange wolf-like creature on his property, according to Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. FWP officials. Okay, so this is basically what they're claiming here. The animal came within several hundred yards of the rancher's livestock. He shot it and reported it as required by law. Okay, the animal was a young, non-lactating female and a canid or a canine member of the dog family, which includes dogs, foxes, coyotes, and wolves. The animal originally was reported as a wolf, but several Fish and Wildlife and Parks wolf specialists looked at photos of the animal and collectively doubted it was a purebred wolf. The canine teeth were too short, the front paws too small, and the claws on the front paw were too long. So basically, this animal was a strange looking, what the FWP officials submitted, some of its tissue for DNA analysis, and according to the information I got, they were still forthcoming with the test results. So basically, we look at, and if I pronounce this wrong, sorry, but I'm doing it to what I know. Sunko Warankan, basically tribe. For many cryptozoologist enthusiasts, basically cryptozoology being the study of strange, unknown, or hidden animals. This strange Montana canine evokes the Sunko Warankan, a monster of Iowa Indian mythology. The Iowa Indians are a Sioux people whose ancestral homelands included the Great Plains of southern western Wisconsin, eastern Iowa. According to an old Iowa legend, a ferocious hyena-like animal once roamed the American prairies. Due to its habit of killing and devouring dogs, the Iowa called the creature the Sunken Wakan, which translates to carrying off dogs, basically. So, as it became more of a legend, every night this creature snuck into the Iowa camps, and every morning a few more dogs were found missing. When the Iowa figured that these predations had gone on long enough, they decided to ambush the animal. Okay? So, armed with muskets and bows and arrows, they crouched in the darkness beside their teepees, not far from where their dogs were tethered. Okay? Suddenly, a strange wolf-like creature slinked into camp from out of the darkness. The Iowa had never seen anything like it before. The baffled braves sprang from their hidden places and peppered the animal with arrows and musket balls. Incredibly, the missiles failed to bring the creature down. So basically, the arrows and the musket balls didn't bring this creature down. In fact, they only seemed to make it angry. With a blood-curdling shriek, the animal lunged at its tormentors. The warriors drove it back with their spears and war clubs. After a tremendous struggle, the animal retreated back into the darkness. The Iowa decided to follow it. So these braves tracked the creature through the night and most of the following day. Eventually, they succeeded in cornering it. The creature put up a savage last stand and fought to the bitter end. When it finally fell under the Iowa's guns, it cried like a human being. Once the creature was dead, the braves skinned its carcass, painted its hide, and placed it in a medicine bundle. Okay, the Iowa believed that whoever wore this medicine bundle in battle would be immune to enemy bullets and arrows, much like the indomitable monster whose skin is contained. Okay. There's another person known as Lance Foster. He had his theory. So back in 1991, a graduate student of Iowa State University, Foster rediscovered the legend of the Sunko Oracan. Okay. The legend reminded Foster of a mysterious stuffed canine which was once on display in a small museum in Henry Lake, Idaho. Foster knew that the museum had closed down long ago and that the stuffed animal was missing. He speculated that the lost curio might be, of the Iowa's specimen, or relative of the vicious dog-eating monster of Iowa lore. Foster related his theory to Loren Coleman, a prominent American cryptozoologist. Using the information that Foster gave him, Coleman unearthed the fascinating backstory behind the stuffed animal at Henry Lake. He included this story in his 1999 book, Cryptozoology A to Z. Going with this, according to the story, a family by the name of Hutchins traveled by stagecoach to Montana's Madison River Valley sometime in the 1880s. There, the family's patriarch, Israel Alman Hutchins, established a ranch. No sooner had he and his family settled into the new, routine, however, that their lives were turned upside down by the arrival of a strange, unwanted visitor. So, Israel's grandson, zoologist Dr. Ross Hutchins, described the incident in his 1977 book, Trails to Nature's Mysteries, The Life of a Working Naturalist. So, according to Dr. Ross, saying that Israel heard his dogs barking one winter morning and headed over to investigate. He discovered a dark, wolf-like beast chasing his wife's geese. He shot at the animal with his rifle but missed. It ran down the river and disappeared into the bush. Several days later, members of the Hutchins family spied the mysterious animal at dawn. They saw it several more times around the ranch. The neighbors also saw the creature around their own ranch, located about 15 miles down the river. Okay. Those who saw the animal described it as being nearly black, with high shoulders and a back that sloped downwards like a hyena. At night, the animal made haunting vocalizations with which almost sounded like human screams, they're saying. One morning in late January, Israel, alerted by the barking of his dogs, saw the creature and shot it dead. Just what the animal was is still an open question, according to Dr. Ross. After its death, the Hutchins family donated the creature's body to a man named Sherwood. Sherwood stuffed the animal and kept it in his aforementioned museum at Henry Lake. he dubbed the beast Ringdoctus, or Ringdocus, depending on how you want to pronounce it. I believe there is a proper way, but I'm not into my full proper Latin linguist tongue here. Okay, so we're just gonna a little bit of conclusion here. In November 2007, another grandson of Israel Hutchins named Jack Kirby rediscovered the stuffed Ringdocus in the Idaho Museum of Natural History. Sure enough, the animal is a strange wolf-like creature with dark coat, a narrow snout, and a back that slopes downward like a hyena's. Kirby repossessed the mount in his grandfather's name before donating it to the Madison Valley History Museum in Montana, where it remains apparently to this day. Kirby neglected to submit its hair for DNA analysis, preferring that the mystery of its identity live on. To date, no such DNA analysis can be conducted. Okay. There's been other things throughout Montana, throughout Iowa, other parts in Alberta, Canada, as well as Nebraska, Iowa, and Illinois. Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks Department have identified a 4-year-old male wolf with abnormally red fur in around the Garfield County. And that's about maybe in November of 2006. They said it was about 106 pounds. It killed about 120 sheep, supposedly. There's a lot around some of the Montana ranch in that time. We're still with the mysterious canine. There are still people that occasionally are saying that they see Waheela around. Waheela, as I said, originated and came from the Nahani Valley, okay, of Canada, up in the north. And they basically believe that it may be a creature that is to protect the lands. Maybe just something that is grown and roams and does what it does. It has its history, its mythology, and its legends behind it. If we look at part of it here as an extension of the Sunko Orakan Iowa tribe, it might be a Relica Borophagus, an ancient bone-crushing hyena-like dog known to have lived in North America during the Pleistocene epoch, part of the dinosaur or before the dinosaurs. Alternatively, I believe cryptozoologists put forth the notion that the animal might be a surviving Hyenodon montanus. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm going to spell out the first word here: Hyaenodon. Montanus, a species of carnivorous mammal believed to have gone extinct during the Oligocene epoch. And I could be pronouncing that wrong too, but just to think about it, and the stories that I've been told as well from some of the native Indians here in Ontario, Canada, the Wahila is a very unusual wolf, bigger than a dire, bigger than a gray wolf, the size of a bear. Sometimes they often think that it is a cross between a wolf and a bear, but it's got short hind legs, longer front, and acts and moves like a hyena. Is willing to eat just about anything, but usually preying more on dead animals that have already been killed than trying to go after livestock. But they will do it if, I guess, they're hungry. It's like a regular wolf, but are loners. Very seldom are they together, and for when they are, it's a very short breeding season. And I think there was one other thing when I was doing my research that they came together, I guess, to state as, like most animals out in the wild, they have their combat to decide as to who has the rights to be the alpha. And being an alpha wolf doesn't mean that they're the leader of the group or the pack. It just means that they have the legal rights to be the one who gets to mate with the females first. The strongest out of the group of wolves always will lead, whereas the weakest is usually closer to the middle or to the back of the pack, and the alpha and the beta female, or the alpha female if you want, the one who usually has most of the babies, those two are always in the middle of the group. They're always protected. So the most strongest of the pack will always come forth first. Same if when they're out in the wilderness and they're traveling along, the strongest will always lead them off to where they go. The alphas are always in the middle. They never are barking orders or anything like that, and they follow along. But it just means that they are the ones who are allowed to breed. Okay, just so you kind of understand for those of you who don't. So with that being said, you want to go to northern Canada with me? And we go look for Waheela? Just remember though, when we hear it, it's not going to howl, it's going to scream like a human. And with that said, I hope you enjoyed this part of the 8 mythological creatures of Canada.